My name is David Anderson, and 2 weeks ago, I thought I knew what fear felt like. I was wrong. Fear, I have learned since that terrible morning, is a baby sock pinned to your front door like a gauntlet, a borrowed lullaby whispering through an empty nursery, and a court summons handed to you by strangers who claim they know better than you how to care for your own child. I'm 27, a data analyst for a fintech startup in Seattle, married 2 years to my wife Emily, a 26-year-old elementary school teacher, and we have a 10-month-old daughter, Sophia, our little ray of sunshine. We live in a modest craftsman bungalow on Beacon Hill, its red door framed by creeping ivy and wind chimes clinking in the spring breeze. We chose this neighborhood for its schools, its parks, and the sense that here we would raise our child safe from the worst of the world. Then, one ordinary Wednesday, I came home from work to find our world upended. I was still halfway through my customary quarter-pound coffee when I got Emily's shaky text. "They're here, CPS." My phone buzzed again almost immediately, with a photo, a uniformed CPS caseworker standing in our sunlit living room, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the butterfly wallpapered nursery as though it were a crime scene. The caption read simply, "They want to see her, now." I bolted out of my office, nearly slamming the front door, and raced up the narrow stairwell to our apartment's main floor. There she was, caseworker Jensen, mid-30s. No smile, her name tag clipped precisely to her navy blue blouse. She didn't look at me, only consulted her clipboard. I took a deep breath, holding my daughter's lavender-trimmed blanket to my chest. "This is Dr. Patel's 6-month checkup. The chart shows normal development." I handed over the medical printout. She flipped through it, as if reading the back of a cereal box. "Baby's fine," she said without inflection. "I need to see her." Emily appeared behind me, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching Sophia wrapped in the lavender blanket. "She's eating well, sleeping well," Emily whispered, voice brittle. "There's nothing to investigate." Jensen flipped her clipboard closed and extended a sheet of paper. "Supervised visitation order, 10 days until hearing. No unsupervised contact." Emily gasped. "What? Why?" There was no call, no warning. The caseworker's eyes met mine briefly. "Complaint of neglect filed by a family member," she said. "I'm here to execute the removal order." In that moment, my world went dark. I watched as Emily's knees buckled, and I caught her before she fell. Sophia's head bobbed in her mother's arms, oblivious. I felt an icy spike of rage twist in my gut. This was a family member's doing someone with access with motive. My mind flew back to last month's visit from my mother-in-law, Janet Lee, a CPS supervisor in suburban Bellevue. She'd cornered Emily at a tea shop lecturing on parenting best practices and professional observations about Emily's mental health after maternity. She'd complained about something trivial Emily let Sophia nap through lunch one afternoon. I'd brushed it off as overbearing, but now I understood the stakes. Janet wielded her CPS connections like a cudgel. Emily cradled Sophia against her chest and whispered, "I'll fight this. I promise." I dropped to my knees, looked up at Jensen. "You can't take our daughter," I said. "We've done nothing wrong." Jensen's expression stayed blank. "The judge signed this order. I must follow it." She reached for her radio. I grabbed her arm. "Stop. Tell me who filed this complaint." Her jaw clenched. "I'm not at liberty to discuss that." I tightened my grip. "I have a right to know." She shrugged free and stepped back. "You'll learn at the hearing." By the time Jensen left with Sophia, escorted by a second caseworker whose eyes darted guiltily at us, our living room felt cavernous, emptied of all warmth. Emily sank onto the sofa in tears. I collapsed beside her, mind spinning. We stared at the lavender blanket folded on the coffee table, its pastel flowers mocking us. How could someone weaponize the system we trusted? How do you fight a judge's signature, a court order, a mother-in-law with connections? That evening, through blurred vision, I dialed our family lawyer, Margaret Chen, a former public defender who'd moved into private practice. She answered, exhausted but sympathetic. "You've got 10 days until your hearing," she said. "I can file an emergency motion to stay the order, but you'll need solid evidence, emails, messages, anything showing your parenting is sound." I hung up, heart pounding, and turned to Emily. "I'll get that evidence. I'll do whatever it takes." For the next 48 hours, we transformed our home into a command center. I set up a whiteboard in the dining nook, dividing it into columns, evidence witnesses timeline. Emily printed every notification from Janet's CPS email account that she could access emails praising swift family intervention text messages, boasting about removing the child in 24 hours. She contacted my childhood friend Marco, a cybersecurity specialist, to recover deleted messages from Janet's old phone. Marco worked through the night, bypassing passcodes, uncovering a thread that read, "I've filed the neglect complaint. They won't question me." Meanwhile, I combed through our home security footage from the past month, looking for Janet's gray sedan idling outside our house after noon, like she was casing the place. Sure enough, 3 days before the removal order, cameras caught her strolling the sidewalk at lunchtime, phone pressed to her ear, as though reporting on a live wire. I downloaded the clips, stamped with date and time. I scoured our baby monitor recordings, ghostly static between midnight and dawn, and discovered muffled voices I didn't recognize. We hired an audio forensics expert to isolate the voices. It matched Janet's distinct laugh from an old voicemail. Emily, battling tears and caffeinated jitters, drafted affidavits from neighbors describing Janet's behavior, how she hovered at our fence during playdates, how she quizzed our babysitter for details on Sophia's nap schedule. My own parents wrote letters vouching for our parenting since our first happy family dinner. We collectively assembled what felt like a fortress of alibis logs and legal declarations. Yet every new piece of evidence reminded us how far we'd come just to prove our innocence. On the evening of day 3, we held a small press conference on our front porch. I stood beside Emily, the lavender blanket and baby sock draped over the porch railing, while our friend and local blogger Marisol live-streamed to thousands. I explained how CPS, guided by Janet's conflict of interest complaint, had bypassed medical records and standard protocols to remove our child. Emily, voice cracking, told viewers of her fear watching justice slip away despite her unwavering love for Sophia. We called for an immediate moratorium on the removal order and demanded an independent investigation into Janet's misuse of her CPS role. Comments exploded. "This is barbaric. How can CPS do this?" I stand with the Andersons. By the time our hearing arrived on Friday, we'd filled 2 3-inch binders with exhibits, affidavits, and digital forensic reports. Margaret Chen stood with us in the courtroom, confident and fierce. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, listened as Margaret laid out our case. Janet's complaint was a conflict of interest. Janet had failed to disclose her relationship to CPS leadership, and CPS had ignored standard intake protocols, namely consulting Dr. Patel's medical records. She concluded, "This is a clear abuse of authority. The stay should be granted and the removal order vacated." Opposing counsel, a CPS attorney with a steely jaw, argued that CPS acted in good faith on an anonymous report and that familial ties were irrelevant. He insisted our evidence was hearsay and collateral, but Margaret countered each objection with statutory references. Texas Family Code requires disclosure of conflicts and adherence to medical evidence. The courtroom buzzed with tension. After 2 hours, the judge peered over her glasses, tapped the bench, and ruled, "The removal order is stayed pending a full evidentiary hearing. Ms. Anderson shall have immediate custodial rights restored. The court orders CPS to produce all case files and communications related to this matter within 48 hours. Relief washed over me like a tide. Emily burst into tears, clutching Sophia in her arms as the courtroom emptied. Outside, Marisol's crew filmed our jubilation. Emily hugging Margaret, me flinging my arms in the air, neighbors cheering. For once, fear gave way to elation. That night at home, we sat in the nursery, the pale lavender walls now safe again. I wrapped my arms around Emily and Sophia, the music box's soft lullaby echoing in the background. The baby sock, now carefully placed on a shelf, no longer felt like a symbol of terror, but a reminder of our triumph over injustice. Yet as I watched our little girl drift to sleep, I realized this was only the first battle. CPS would appeal. Janet would push back, and the underlying culture of unchecked power would still lurk among agency ranks. We'd won a reprieve, but the fight to protect our daughter and every child at risk would stretch on. I kissed Sophia's forehead, feeling the soft press against my lips, and whispered, "I promise I'll keep fighting for you." And as the final notes of the music box faded into the night, I knew that promise would guide me through whatever storms lay ahead. The morning after our victory felt surreal, like waking from a half-nightmare into another equally vivid one. Sophia was nestled in her crib, padded by her lavender blanket, breathing softly as the first slivers of dawn filtered through the curtains. For a moment, I let myself believe we had truly turned a corner. Then I remembered Justice's proviso. The stay was temporary. CPS could, and almost certainly would, appeal, and Janet Lee would stop at nothing to reclaim her vengeance. As Emily brewed coffee, I opened my laptop to check the court docket. Sure enough, CPS's notice of appeal was filed that morning. We now had 10 days to respond, and the appellate court's timeline would move faster than the district court's. Before breakfast, I drafted our response brief outline, 15 points, detailing the district court's correct application of conflict of interest law error in CPS's failure to disclose familial ties and the irreparable harm to our family if the removal order remained in effect. Emily joined me at the kitchen table, rub of fatigue in her eyes. "How do you want to organize the arguments?" she asked. We spread out yesterday's binders alongside fresh notes from Margaret and Karen. Emily suggested starting with the emotional core, what it feels like as a mother to watch your child whisked away, and then layering the legal framework on top. I nodded, grateful for her clarity. We spent 2 hours dividing sections. I'd draft the statement of facts and standard of review. She'd tackle legal argument and relief requested. By mid-morning, our phones buzzed with calls from supporters, neighbors, offering to testify about Janet's stalking behavior, a pediatric nurse willing to vouch for our parenting, and our friend Marco, insisting he found more deleted texts from Janet's phone, including one saying, "I'll do whatever it takes to make them pay." Each tip fed our momentum, but it also built the weight of expectation. Every new piece of evidence had to be vetted, cited, and presented strategically. Our case had to be airtight because CPS would exploit any flaw. Around noon, I took a break to homeschool myself on a PLAT procedure, reading chapters on emergency injunction appeals in Texas and federal analogs. The pace was dizzying. Once we filed our response, the appellate court would schedule a hearing within 7 days. We'd have to supplement the record swiftly. I drafted a letter to the district clerk ordering certified transcripts of the stay hearing and all exhibits so we could include them in our appendix. I clicked send with a jolt. Each email, each filing was a step on a fraying tightrope. That afternoon, Emily and I conducted our greatest strategic triumph, yet a quiet meeting with the Department of Family and Child Services Commissioner, Dr. Linda Rosales. We had an in through a mutual friend from Emily's school. I'd emailed Rosales late last night with a respectful request for a direct inquiry into the removal order's propriety. To my surprise, Rosales agreed to see us in person at her downtown office. She greeted us in a modest suite filled with children's artwork and shelves of textbooks on child development theory. Her tone was earnest. "I'm deeply concerned by allegations of insider influence. CPS must operate with integrity." We laid out our case succinctly, the unredacted memo, the security footage, the appeal filing. Dr. Rosales listened, brows furrowed. "If Janet Lee used her position to file false reports, that's a breach of conduct. We can launch an administrative inquiry separate from your lawsuit." Emily's eyes brightened. "We'd welcome that," she said. Rosales nodded. "I'll assign an independent investigator within 48 hours. If violations are found, disciplinary actions will follow up to dismissal and revocation of CPS certification." We left her office feeling the rush of leverage. Now CPS faced pressure from within, as well as from our legal campaign. Back home, we updated Margaret, who grinned. "Now we can cite an administrative inquiry." In our reply, brief shows judicial prudence that state oversight is already in motion. We added the timeline to our outline file response brief by Thursday. Include notice of the administrative inquiry and request expedited consideration. With a flurry of tracked revisions, we polished the draft into a final form. By 10:00 p.m., I hit submit on the e-filing portal. A green banner confirmed our response document filed. Notice of appeal response. I leaned back, exhaling. Emily handed me 2 mugs of tea. We clinked them together in a silent toast to temporary relief. Yet as the clock edged toward midnight, guilt and anxiety pulled me from our brief celebration. I lay in bed beside Emily, staring at the ceiling. What if CPS drags this out for months? I asked. Or worse, what if the appellate court reverses the stay? Emily slipped her arm around me. Then we go to the Supreme Court of Texas, or even federal court if necessary. We aren't stopping. I nodded, comforted by her conviction. We whispered until sleep claimed us. Tuesday dawned gray and drizzly. I left the house early for a meeting with Representative Lin Nguyen at the Capitol. We needed legislative backup in case the appellate stay failed. Nguyen welcomed me in her office, shelves lined with legislative journals. I've drafted a companion bill, Protect Parents' Rights Act, to codify emergency stays and removal orders pending appeal. If we can fast-track it through the special session in August, we'll have a statutory safety net regardless of our case's outcome. I scanned the draft, a narrow but powerful amendment to the Family Code granting automatic stays on removal orders when a parent files an appeal. Nguyen continued, "We've got support from 10 senators and 8 reps willing to sponsor. We can file tomorrow." Together, we drafted an emergency memo to file with the legislative clerk and coordinated with the governor's office for special session agenda placement. I felt a thrill. Our fight was scaling the walls of government at multiple levels, judicial, administrative, and now statutory. Nguyen promised to hold a press conference that afternoon, so I hurried back home to prepare a statement. We drafted talking points. We're not undermining child welfare. We're fortifying parental due process, and no parent should lose their child on a whim. At 3:00 p.m., the Capitol courtyard filled with cameras and reporters as Nguyen introduced the new bill, flanked by me and 2 other parents who'd faced wrongful investigations. I spoke briefly. Our children deserve agencies that protect them, not weapons that tear families apart. This bill ensures due process for parents, so no one else endures what we faced. Flashbulbs popped. CNN's Austin correspondent tweeted video clips. Within hours, the docket showed a filed bill, HB 7105, Protect Parents' Rights Act, set for committee consideration in August. By evening, I felt a growing weariness beneath my triumphs. Emily and I ate dinner in near silence, exhausted but observant of how the pieces were falling into place. CPS faced an administrative inquiry, our appellate response was filed, and a legislative safety net bill was on the horizon. Yet none guaranteed long-term relief. Each step could be reversed, delayed, or undermined. We needed to keep pressure on every front. Wednesday, public education and community mobilization. To broaden our support, we spent Wednesday mobilizing community resources. Emily arranged a meeting with the Parent-Teacher Association at her school, presenting the Protect Parents' Rights Act and urging fellow parents to contact their legislators. I joined forces with Marisol's digital platform to launch a statewide petition demanding a stop to insider-driven removals, each signature captured by Texas Precinct. We also organized Know Your Rights workshops with local legal clinics, teaching parents how to navigate CPS visits, file appeals, and document interactions. The turnout was astonishing, a packed room of nervous but eager parents taking notes, committing to stand by one another. I realized our personal nightmare had tapped into a widespread fear, and that shared anxiety could catalyze lasting change. Thursday, appellate brief heard and legislative draft filed. Thursday brought the day for our appellate argument. At 10:00 a.m., Margaret and I stood before the Fifth Court of Appeals in Dallas, a grand courtroom of redwood paneling and high ceilings. Margaret presented our argument. The district court's stay was necessary to prevent irreparable harm, and the conflict of interest violation warranted judicial deference. CPS's counsel argued their good faith defense and urged the court to focus on procedural regularity. After 45 minutes of oral argument, the panel retreated to deliberate. On the same afternoon, Nguyen's office filed HB 7105 and notified local news. I felt time collapsing. Our fate and the statutory safety net would soon be decided. That night back home, my phone lit up with alerts, comments on the petition, RSVP, confirmations for August's special session, and gracious emails from colleagues in other states asking how they could implement similar measures. Martinez, my college roommate, and now a public policy professor, emailed a draft white paper on comparative due process protections in family courts. Across disciplines and geographies, our local struggle was resonating. Friday cliffhanger decisions awaited. Friday morning arrived heavy with anticipation. At 9:00 a.m., the Texas Register tweeted that public comments on CPS's rulemaking would close tonight, and at noon, the Fifth Court of Appeals would issue its order on our stay. Simultaneously, HB 7105 was slated for emergency assignment to the House Judiciary Committee next week, its first legislative hurdle. I awoke early, attended Mass with Emily, an anchor of faith amid chaos, and then sat at my desk, armed with caffeine and our binders. At 11:45, my email dinged, opinion issued by Fifth Court of Appeals. My heart pounded as I clicked the link. Seconds felt like hours as I scanned for affirmed or reversed. And then there it was. The stay is lifted pending appeal. The district court's order is reversed, and jurisdiction is remanded with instructions to dissolve the stay. My chest tightened. CPS had won the appellate battle for now. Relief turned to ice. Simultaneously, I saw a House clerk's email, HB 7105, assigned to House Judiciary Committee for hearing on August 12th. A narrow margin of hope flickered. If the statutory fix passed, we'd regain the stay. But in the interim, CPS would likely execute the original removal order, and Janet Lee would move to confiscate Sophia again. I stared at the verdict, trembling. Emily rushed in. "What is it?" I swallowed hard. "The stay's dissolved." Her face crumpled. "They're taking her back." I rose, fists clenched. Unless HB 7105 passes and Governor Abbott signs it retroactively, yes. In that stunned silence, I saw the stakes in sharper relief. Our legal victories had limits, and we needed legislative armor more than ever. The next week would determine whether our daughter would remain with us or be snatched again. As the first tear slipped down Emily's cheek, I vowed out loud, no matter what, every senator, every judge, every parent will hear our voice until Sophia is safe. And with that, the real crucible began a race against time, power, and bureaucracy, where our daughter's fate hung in the balance. The courthouse email hit my inbox at 11:45 a.m. on that bruising Friday stay, dissolved. Removal order reinstated. My hands shook as I read the words. The hours of strategy, the mountain of evidence, the legislative lifeline we'd thrown, it wasn't enough. CPS could again whisk Sophia away. My mind went blank. For a moment, I saw the baby sock pinned to our door like an accusation. Then a fiercer resolve flooded me. I would not let a temporary setback snuff out our fight. Morning, rallying our legal forces within minutes, I called Margaret Chen. Her calm voice on the other end was a balm. "David, I know this is hard, but we predicted an adverse ruling. This is precisely why we filed HB 7105. We have 2 weeks to shut down that removal order again, under the new statute if it passes, and we can file an emergency motion for a temporary injunction in district court within hours." The legal gears clicked into motion. Margaret would draft the emergency injunction motion citing both the appellate decision's narrow grounds and the imminent legislative safeguard. "Serve it on CPS counsel by noon," she said. I tapped her instructions into my phone, grateful for her clarity. Meanwhile, I emailed our School of Law contacts, lining up pro bono appellate lawyers, ready to take this fight to the Texas Supreme Court if necessary. I texted Karen Burke to begin prepping the writ of certiorari. We had a firewall of legal options, each more arduous than the last, but our daughter's well-being demanded every conceivable weapon. Midday navigating the governor's office. Next, I pivoted back to Representative Nguyen's team. The appellate court's decision means HB 7105 is now our only immediate stay of the removal order. I messaged Jenna, "Can you secure a special emergency session on Saturday?" Within an hour, her response came, "We're coordinating with the governor's office. They've signaled willingness to include the bill in a 48-hour special session call if we deliver a parental petition with 10,000 verified signatures by tonight." The target was staggering, but within reach thanks to Marisol's digital platform and our grassroots petition. I spent the next hour drafting a concise, emotionally resonant petition message. This week, a Washington state appellate court dissolved a stay protecting the Johnson family from a wrongful CPS removal. Our Texas legislature must act now this Saturday to enact the Protect Parents' Rights Act, so no child is ripped from loving arms without immediate recourse. Sign below to demand a special session call and save our children. I pressed publish, then shared the link across every social channel email list and community forum we had. Afternoon, organizing grassroots momentum, Emily and I turned our living room into a hub of activity. A dozen volunteers clustered around laptops. There were concerned teachers, stay-at-home parents, small business owners, and even a retired judge from our neighborhood. They called friends, door-knocked in Beacon Hill staffed phone banks, and sent hundreds of text message invitations to church and PTA groups. By 2:00 p.m., our petition had won 200 signatures. By 4:00 p.m., 500. Each new name felt like a brick in a barrier against injustice. At 5:00 p.m., news outlets reached out for comment on the appellate reversal. On camera, I spoke through clenched teeth. No parent should live under the constant threat of a legal system manipulated by insiders. The appellate court's decision underscores the urgent need for statutory protection. We ask Governor Abbott to call a special session this Saturday to pass HB 7105 and safeguard families across Texas. The headlines ran hot parents' plea to Governor Save My Child. Judicial setback spurs new legislative push. Our narrative roared back into public view. Evening, drafting the emergency injunction motion. Back at Margaret's office, I reviewed the draft emergency injunction motion. It laid out 3 key points: likelihood of success on the merits, evidence of conflict of interest abuse by Janet Lee, and CPS's departure from mandatory procedures, irreparable harm, Sophia's emotional trauma from removal, parental bond disruption, and public humiliation, public interest protecting families' rights under due process consistent with the legislature's recent signaling for reform. Margaret explained we'd file in the same district court Judge Alvarez had proven fair and sympathetic. We would request a hearing within 48 hours and seek an immediate temporary restraining order. I signed the final page, feeling the weight of the binder's shift in my hand as I walked to the clerk's window. The clerk glanced at the thick packet and asked if I had a motion fee. My slip of a smile hid the racing blood. Waiver requested under indigent parent statute. She processed the waiver and stamped the filing. Filed 4:47 p.m., July 25, 2025. I exhaled inwardly. Late evening building, political pressure. With the injunction motion filed, I moved on to politics again. I drafted a sharply phrased letter to Governor Abbott to be published as an open op-ed, Your Honor. The bench's reversal of the stay underscores a systemic gap in parental due process. I urge you to call a special session this weekend and sign HB 7105 so that no Texas parent lives in perpetual fear of bureaucratic overreach. I sent it to the Tribune Chronicle and Statesman editorial desks, requesting immediate publication. I then tweeted excerpts with links Texas parents deserve the right to appeal before removal. At Gov Abbott call, special session now. #protect our kids. Retweets and likes exploded. As midnight approached, our petition reached 12,000 signatures, 20% above our goal. Volunteers set up tents outside the Capitol for a Saturday parent solidarity vigil, promising presence until legislators acted. Pace ticked by each minute, a drumbeat counting down to potential calamity. Night restless resolve. At 1:00 a.m., exhaustion caught me. I returned home to find Emily asleep in the rocking chair, her hand on Sophia's bassinet. The soft glow of the music box's tiny lamp still shimmered on the mantel, its lullaby lingering in the hush. I slipped into bed, mind whirring. The injunction hearing would come tomorrow. The special session call hinged on signature verification, and the appellate court's clock for emergency appeals loomed. Our daughter's fate balanced on threads of law, politics, and public will. I reached for Emily's hand. She stirred opening eyes that shone with love and shared anxiety. "Did we do everything?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand. Yes. And then more. We lay silent, hearts beating in tandem with the ticking clock. Dawn of decision day, morning light crept in as I rose at 5:00 a.m., drafting last-minute notes for the injunction hearing. Summarize key facts in 90 seconds, anticipate CPS's good faith defense, emphasize the appellate reversal's urgency. At 7:00 a.m., Emily and I stood on our porch, Sophia between us, in a sling, offering a live-streamed message to supporters. Today we face our greatest test. Our injunction hearing begins at 4:00 p.m., and the special session signature deadline is 6:00 p.m. We need every parent, every citizen, every Texan to stand with us. If you haven't signed the petition, do so now. Send your calls to the governor. Bring your presence to the Capitol. We will not let our child be taken again. Comments poured in. We're with you, CTO. Texas parents, see you at the Capitol. Afternoon, the injunction hearing. At 3:30 p.m., we arrived at Judge Alvarez's courtroom. CPS counsel looked prepared, stacking binders like walls. Margaret approached the bench, motion in hand. McKinnon rose across from her. Judge Alvarez entered and called the hearing to order. Without fanfare, she invited Margaret's argument. Margaret spoke with steely precision. Your Honor, the appellate court gave us only one remedy, legislative or judicial. We have active legislation pending and strong appellate grounds. The district court's stay must be reinstated to prevent irreparable harm to Sophia. She laid out the new threats, CPS's notice of appeal pending removal execution, and our legislative petition with over 12,000 signatures. McKinnon argued the legislature's bill was not yet law and that judicial intervention would usurp legislative authority. Judge Alvarez listened intently, brow furrowed. After McKinnon sat, she conferred quietly with her clerk, then turned back. Motion granted. The stay is reinstated pending appeal. Relief roared through the courtroom like a wave. Emily hugged me as tears streamed. McKinnon stared in disbelief. The judge's ruling restored our custody. CPS could not remove Sophia until the appellate process and the legislature had their say. Evening victorious but vigilant. Back at home, the music box tumbled from the mantel as Emily ran toward me, and Sophia's tiny arms waved in delight. Neighbors honked and cheered outside. We released a statement, justice prevailed today in court, and Texas parents can breathe easier, at least for now. But I knew this battle was far from over. HB 7105 still needed the governor's special session call. The appellate appeal loomed, and the underlying culture of CPS insider abuse would require relentless oversight. At 8:00 p.m., Governor Abbott announced on Twitter, Governor Abbott approves calling a special session for July 27th to consider HB 7105, Protect Parents' Rights Act. My phone exploded. I looked at Emily, stunned. The legislative safety net was real. We had wedged a legal reprieve and a political solution in a single day. But as the fireworks of public solidarity crackled outside our window, I knew our true work began now, shepherding the bill through a whirlwind special session, defending against new CPS challenges, and safeguarding our daughter's right to remain with us. I held Emily and Sophia close, the baby sock and music box shining on the mantel behind us, symbols of fear transformed into shields of justice. And in that quiet moment, as the city's nightlights twinkled beyond the window, I whispered to Sophia's sleeping form, "Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we finish this fight." The first glint of dawn cut through the curtains, but I was already sitting upright in bed, my mind racing through a relentless checklist. The special session for HB 7105, the Protect Parents' Rights Act, had been officially called for 10:00 a.m. tomorrow. We needed lobby meetings, a press conference, legislative testimony, and final vote watch logistics all in place before then. Meanwhile, the appellate clock was ticking on our emergency writ to the Texas Supreme Court. If we lost there, CPS could move again to remove Sophia. I swung my legs out of bed and padded to the kitchen, finding Emily assembling lunches and feeding baby Sophia a bottle. She looked at me over her glasses, fatigue and fierce determination mingling in her eyes. "How's the writ looking?" she asked. "Nearly final," I said, sipping my coffee. Margaret wants one more citation on the family code provision, but we should have it filed by noon. I pulled up the draft on my phone and scrolled to the key paragraph. Petitioner shows a substantial likelihood of success, irreparable harm and alignment with public interest, meriting an extraordinary writ. Emily touched my arm. "We also have tomorrow's legislative prep. Should we run through testimony points over lunch?" I nodded, pulling my laptop onto the dining table. Morning final writ submission and legislative prep. At 9:00 a.m., I met Margaret at her downtown office to finalize the writ and emergency application. The motion had to be precise. We argued that the appellate court's dissolution of the stay violated fundamental due process under both the Texas Constitution and the newly minted legislative intent behind HB 7105's emergency provisions, which we'd asked lawmakers to draft retroactive authority into law. Margaret refined the argument with characteristically surgical edits, replacing judicial usurpation with corrective judicial oversight to appeal to judicial modesty. By 11:30 a.m., she e-filed the writ with the Supreme Court, and the portal confirmed receipt, emergency application under advisement, meaning a 5-justice panel would consider whether to reinstate the stay and review the appellate ruling. We ate a quick sandwich at her desk, energy bars and water, then dove into tomorrow's agenda. We mapped a timeline hour by hour, arrive at the Capitol by 8:00 a.m., meet with Nguyen and Senate sponsors, hold a coalition press conference at noon, testify in committee at 2:00 p.m., and then watch the floor vote at 5:00 p.m. If all went smoothly, the governor would sign around 7:00 p.m., and our court writ would become moot. If not, we'd have to press the writ or consider emergency federal relief. The complexity was dizzying, but a working plan grounded us. Midday coalition strategy meeting. Back at our house by 1:00 p.m., I found Emily hosting a coalition meeting in the living room. Local pastors, union leaders, pediatricians, and nonprofits crowded around sofas and folding chairs. On the whiteboard were 3 bulleted goals. Legislative success: secure 100% passage of HB 7105 in special session. Judicial backup: keep writ front and center so the Supreme Court feels the legislative urgency. Public messaging: maintain a 24/7 media presence, updates, interviews, social posts to sustain momentum. Sarah, a local pastor, offered to organize a 9:00 a.m. prayer vigil on the Capitol steps tomorrow. Dr. Reyes, a pediatric neurologist, volunteered to testify on the medical harm of repeated removals. A grassroots organizer, Tama, detailed phone bank scripts to ensure every legislator's office received at least 500 constituent calls before noon. Seeing dozens of diverse community leaders united around our cause made me realize how deeply this struggle had captured public conscience and how the moral clarity of our fight transcended partisan lines. Afternoon media blitz and personal reflections. By 3 p.m., I shifted to media duties. First, a live segment on KXS-TV, Parent Fights Back, calls for special session to protect families. Under bright studio lights, I repeated our core message: due process for parents, urgency of retroactive relief, and the moral imperative to protect innocent families from insider vendettas. Next, a call-in interview with NPR's Texas Matters, where I discussed procedural flaws in CPS's removal protocols and how HB 7105 would fill those gaps. Each interview was broadcast across radio, television, and social platforms, amplifying our call to action. But behind the public persona, I felt the toll of these last weeks. In quieter moments, I questioned whether our campaign had overshadowed Emily's healing. She'd battled postpartum anxiety after Sophia's removal, and while she'd returned to teaching part-time, the strain was visible in her haunted gaze and restless nights. I caught her sleeping on the sofa with report cards on her lap, her passion for her students pulling her back, even as her heart ached for her daughter. I took her hand during a break. "How are you holding up?" I asked. Her eyes welled. "I'll be okay if Sophia stays with us," she said softly. "That's all that matters." I squeezed her hand, feeling both gratitude and determination. No matter how entrenched the fight, our family's unity was our deepest strength. Late afternoon, writ decision pending. As 4:00 p.m. approached, I darted back to Margaret's office for the Supreme Court's emergency writ decision. We sat at her polished oak table, staring at the screen, willing an update to appear. Finally, the clerk's docket posted "writ denied," cause assigned for full briefing. A numbness washed over me. The Supreme Court refused emergency relief, pushing us back into the appellate circuit and legislative arena. It was crushing, a reminder that judicial processes can be glacial and unresponsive to human urgency. Margaret exhaled, leaning back. "We're not done. We proceed on the appeal, and the legislature's our only immediate remedy. The legislative plan surged back into focus. I scribbled notes for a revised timeline. Tomorrow dawned the special session. We had one shot to secure retroactive stay authority. If that failed, we'd accelerate our appellate briefs and seek federal habeas relief. The stakes had never been more stark. Evening Capitol Steps Vigil. At 6:00 p.m., we gathered on the Capitol's south steps for the prayer vigil. Core coalition members stood in a semicircle, Sarah offering an opening invocation, Tama leading communal chants of "No Child Alone," and Dr. Reyes sharing a benediction. The crowd numbered in the hundreds, parents clutching banners, children in backpacks, students in t-shirts reading Justice for Parents. As the sun set behind the Capitol dome, I spoke briefly, voice trembling with emotion. We stand here not in protest of CPS's mission, but in protest of a system that can be hijacked by insiders with personal grudges. Tomorrow, we trust our lawmakers to enact a law that safeguards due process and prevents this from ever happening again. The vigil closed with the soft strains of the music box melody carried by Tama on her phone. In that shared moment of solidarity, fear gave way, however briefly, to collective courage. Night final prep and resolve. By 9:00 p.m., we reconvened at Nguyen's district office for final prep. The draft of HB 7105 was laid out again, this time with amendments from the Senate's concurrence. We ran through each clause, each sponsor's talking points, and potential amendments from detractors. Karen coached us on anticipating parliamentary maneuvers votes by Teller's 3/5 thresholds possible blue slip tactics. We printed out cheat sheets for legislators and committee clerks, ensuring they had all relevant statute citations and impact data at their fingertips. My voice was rough from hours of talking. Emily offered mints and water. As midnight approached, only one question lingered. Could a desperate agency bruised by our legal victories still find ways to undermine a Sunday special session? CPS's counsel had hinted at emergency rulemaking to delay legislative effect, and rumors circulated of a forthcoming request to the governor to delay the special session by 24 hours. We briefed Nguyen to be on alert for any such maneuver and prepared a rapid response press statement. At 1:00 a.m. back home, I finally sat down with Emily and Sophia. I cradled our daughter as she nursed her fingers curling around mine, oblivious to the machinations that swirled around her. Emily's head rested on my shoulder as I gazed at the framed HB 225, not yet law, but a promise in waiting on our mantle. Next to it stood the baby sock in a shadow box, the music box in its polished cradle. They were the talismans of our Odyssey symbols of vulnerability, transformed into instruments of change. We whispered words of mutual encouragement. "Tomorrow we finish this," I said. "We will." And as Sophia drifted to sleep, I felt a fierce certainty coalesce within me. No appellate setback, no bureaucratic gambit, no midnight rulemaking could eclipse the thunderous will of a community that refused to back down. Tomorrow, across the marble floors of the Capitol, we would seize every moment, every vote, every word to ensure that due process and family law became more than a line in a codebook. We would ensure it became a bulwark against the darkest impulses of insider power. And as the city hush settled around our home, I closed my eyes and breathed in the lullaby of possibility. This fight was far from over, but our daughter slept safe tonight, and we would not rest until that safety was secured in the law itself. Saturday morning broke crisp and overcast, the clouds hanging low over Austin, as if bearing witness to our last chance. Today, the Texas legislature convened for a special session to consider HB 7105, the Protect Parents' Rights Act. If it passed with retroactive effect, Sophia would be shielded from any further removal orders pending appeal. If it failed, CPS could legally whisk her away again, and our months of sacrifice would unravel. By 7:00 a.m., I was on the Capitol's south steps, clutching the binds of our appellate writ, and a petition tablet showing 14,872 signatures, nearly 50% more than our goal. Volunteers huddled beneath awnings against the drizzle, waving signs, "Keep families together," due process for all parents, and the now iconic baby sock pinned to a foam board. The lavender blanket was draped over the railing like a makeshift banner. I scanned the crowd and found Emily pale but resolute, pushing Sophia's stroller under a black umbrella. Their presence anchored me as fog drifted around the Capitol dome. At 8:00 a.m., a coalition press conference commenced. Pastor Sarah offered a brief invocation, and Dr. Reyes summarized child development research on trauma from repeated separation. Representative Lynn Nguyen spoke next, voice steady. Despite the high stakes, HB 7105 is not ideology, it is justice. It is the law protecting innocent parents from being stripped of their children until the courts have spoken. We ask every senator and representative here today to honor due process over bureaucracy. When the crowd cheered, I stepped up. Good morning! I began, my voice carrying across the steps. 2 weeks ago, CPS took our daughter based on a conflict of interest complaint by an insider at CPS, my mother-in-law, without consulting medical records or affording us the right to be heard. We fought in the courts and won a stay. But yesterday, the appellate court dissolved that stay. Without today's legislation, CPS may move again to remove Sophia. I paused to look at Emily, who clasped her hand to her heart. We need HB 7105 to pass with retroactive authority, give parents the right to appeal before removal, ensure no other family endures this nightmare. The crowd roared. Cameras flashed. 8:45 a.m. Inside the chamber. By 9:00 a.m., I entered the Gilded House chamber, past galleries filled with supporters in purple Protect Parents' Rights t-shirts. The representatives filed in their desks, equipped with voting buttons and tablets. At the front, the clerk read the bill caption now amended to include retroactive effect to July 25, 2025, the day the appellate stay was dissolved. I sat behind Nguyen, heart pounding, as the speaker called for debate. Rep. Marcus Bell, a Republican ally, rose first. He spoke of fiscal responsibility, confirming the bill required no new appropriations, and underscored the moral imperative: due process is not a luxury. It is a right embedded in our Constitution. If government can remove a child before a parent's appeal, justice becomes an afterthought. He closed with a plea: let us not betray our founding principles. Heads nodded across party lines. Then came the opposition. Representative Seniorski, known for his skeptical stance on judicial overreach, cautioned that the bill risked hampering CPS's ability to act swiftly in true abuse cases. His voice was firm, but he nodded to Nguyen's response. We are carving out an important exception for cases where parents demonstrate a valid appellate claim. True emergency removals remain intact. This law applies only when the courts have been engaged. A handful of other representatives spoke, each grappling with balancing child safety and parental rights. When debate concluded, Nguyen moved to a voice vote. The chamber recessed for a brief procedural pause. Whispers of close call and favorable signs drifted. Then the clerk announced, the yeas are 98, the nays are 42. The bill passes. Applause erupted. Nguyen beamed as colleagues flocked to shake her hand. I exhaled a smile, cracking through exhaustion. 10:30 a.m. Senate concurrence. Barely 5 hours later, we reconvened in the Senate chamber to concur on the House's retroactive amendment. Senators entered from side doors beneath stone arches. I located Senator Martinez, who greeted me with a determined nod. He had shepherded the Senate's original version, and now he would finalize it. The clerk read the amended text, and Martinez gave a concise floor speech. By retroactive effect, we ensure no family remains vulnerable during the appeals process. Let this law bridge the gap between judicial review and executive action. Opposition was minimal. Only a single senator expressed concerns about legislating emergencies, but accepted Martinez's assurance that true emergencies cases without legislative recourse remained fully accessible to CPS. The vote was unanimous. All in favor say aye. A collective aye reverberated. Martinez raised his hand. The clerk declared the Senate concurring in the House amendment. The chamber broke into subdued applause, a tempered celebration for gravity they understood. 11:15 a.m. To the governor's desk. Within the hour, the enrolled bills cover arrived at Governor Abbott's office. I tracked each step from the Secretary of State's certification to the Texas Register posting. At 2:00 p.m., Abbott's official website updated Governor Abbott's signs, HB 71005, Protect Parents' Rights Act, effective immediately and retroactively to July 25, 2025. A Twitter notification chimed at Gov. Abbott. Today, I sign a law ensuring due process for Texas parents facing child removal proceedings. Hashed Protect Parents' Rights. I felt a surge of relief and triumph, but knew that the writ and injunction remained pending. Now, with statutory authority, we could file a new emergency motion in district court to enforce the retroactive stay of the original removal order. With the governor's signature, Karen crafted our motion pursuant to Texas Family Code, SARS 262.202, G, as amended by HB 710C5. The removal order issued July 14, 2025, shall be stayed retroactively. Plaintiff requests immediate enforcement. We filed that motion at 3:30 p.m., serving CPS counsel via certified mail and e-service. Afternoon, enforcing the retroactive stay at 4:00 p.m. We appeared before Judge Alvarez once more. The courtroom was quieter than our previous hearings. The staff tired from the whirlwind session, but attentive. CPS's counsel objected, claiming statutory ambiguity. Karen countered, pointing to the clear language of the new law, retroactive to July 25th, means any removal order dissolved after that date is automatically stayed. No ambiguity exists. After brief deliberation, Judge Alvarez signed an order. Removal order vacated retroactively. Sophia Anderson remains under parental custody. The courtroom exhaled. Emily, holding Sophia, let tears of joy fall as we realized the removal order was not just temporarily stayed, but permanently nullified. CPS counsel remained stone-faced as they packed their folders. Outside media crews captured our exit legislation and judiciary unite to protect parental rights. Mother rejoices as daughter safe and Texas sets precedent. Evening, a community celebration. That evening, we hosted a celebration in our backyard. Pivot tables and raffle tickets were replaced by fairy lights and folding chairs. Neighbors, pastors, advocates, teachers, and CPS whistleblowers mingled around folding tables stacked with home-cooked dishes. The baby sock, now framed beneath plexiglass with an engraved plaque reading, "Symbol of Justice HB 7105, stood proudly on a wooden pedestal. The music box's delicate melody tinkled between conversations. I delivered a short speech. Tonight we celebrate not just a law, but a principle that due process transcends bureaucracy, that families deserve the presumption of innocence, and that when citizens stand together, they can hold power accountable. This victory is shared by every volunteer, every caller, every signer of our petition." Applause washed over me, warm and genuine. Felt as though the entire community exhaled together. Children played beneath the glow of string lights, dropping breadcrumbs for a scattering of curious squirrels. Our daughter Sophia wobbled on unsteady legs toward me, clutching the final slice of banana bread, her eyes bright. I caught her laughing as her tiny fingers explored the bread. Emily swooped in, hugging us both, her gratitude written in tears. Late-night reflection and resolve. As the celebration wound down, I sat on the porch steps, the cool air settling around me. Lamps from neighboring windows winked like distant stars. I reflected on the journey from that first knock at the door to the appellate reversal and the dizzying whirlwind of legislative maneuvering. Months of anguish, months of fear, and months of allies united culminated in this moment. But I knew this was not the end. Implementation would be key, ensuring CPS leaders adhered to the new law, monitoring for any new attempts to skirt due process, and training caseworkers statewide on the legal changes. I plan to serve on a newly formed oversight committee representing parent advocates working with the IGO to audit compliance and gather feedback. We would continue our Know Your Rights workshops now with a legislative safety net and support families in other states considering similar reforms. Inside, Emily and Sophia were already asleep. I carried our daughter to bed, tucking her beneath a quilt stitched with memories blocks embroidered by friends during the darkest days. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Sleep well, my love. You are safe now." Back on the porch, I set the music box atop the sock's pedestal and wound its key. As Brahms's lullaby unfurled, I watched the wind sway the ivy on our red door and felt a deep sense of peace. Yet beneath it lay the steady determination that vigilance never rests. The symbols of our fight, the framed sock, the music box, the legislative enactment, stood as testaments to what ordinary citizens can achieve. But power, once constrained, often reconstitutes itself in new forms. I resolved to remain watchful, to mentor other families, and to ensure that this legislative shield was more than ink on parchment. It must be living law, vibrant, enforced, and evolving with each challenge. And as the lullaby's final notes echoed into the night, I whispered into the darkness, "Justice is never final." But tonight we made history. Tomorrow we protect it. The Monday morning, after our backyard celebration, dawned clear and still, as though the world itself paused to catch its breath. I slipped quietly out of bed at 5:00 a.m., careful not to wake Emily or Sophia. Yesterday's victories, judicial stay reinstated. HB 7105, signed removal order nullified, felt monumental. Yet I knew they were merely milestones in a journey that demanded perpetual vigilance. Coffee in hand, I wandered into the nursery where Sophia slept, curled around her lavender blanket. I watched her chest rise and fall, framed by the music box on the dresser, and the plexiglass-encased baby sock on the wall, a talisman of both trauma and triumph. I texted Margaret Coffee at 7. Need to discuss Oversight Committee kickoff. And Nguyen, can we meet at 8 in your office? Want to propose pilot compliance audits. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet before the storm of implementation began. 7:30 a.m. The first Oversight Committee meeting. By 7:30 a.m., I was seated in a glass-walled conference room in the Capitol Annex, joined by Inspector General Aisha Brooks, Representative Lin Nguyen, Senator Marcus Bell, and 2 representatives from the Texas Children's Advocacy Alliance. The long table bore folders stamped implementation plan training modules and compliance metrics. And as chair of the newly formed Parents Oversight Advisory Council, I opened the meeting. Thank you all for convening so early. Yesterday, we secured the legal framework. Today, we build the mechanisms to ensure CPS abides by it. Our goals: mandatory retraining of 500 caseworkers on due process protocols, rollout of a digital whistleblower portal by October 1st, and quarterly audits of removal orders for conflict of interest flags. We'll pilot audits in Travis and Harris counties, then scale statewide. Aisha Brooks nodded, her calm authority anchoring the room. Our team has drafted an RFP for an external auditing firm. We aim to select a vendor by September and begin pilots by November. Nguyen added, I've arranged provisional funding lines in the upcoming budget to maintain IGO staffing levels and technology upgrades. Senator Bell chimed in, the Senate Committee on Finance supports ongoing appropriations conditional on quarterly performance reports. We hashed out timelines, draft training curriculum by August 15th, schedule mandatory in-service training sessions in each region from September through December, launch the whistleblower portal with secure encryption by October, and hold the first public hearing on compliance metrics on December 10th. We also reserved seats on the Advisory Council for 2 more parent advocates and a retired family court judge to ensure balanced perspectives. By 9:00 a.m., the action plan was adopted. We left energized, knowing that our law would mean nothing without robust enforcement and community engagement. 10:00 a.m., revisiting the district court for final confirmation. Next on my agenda was Judge Alvarez's courtroom, where we would file a motion to enforce the retroactive stay under HB 7105 and dismiss the underlying removal petition once and for all. Margaret, Emily, and I arrived to find the docket prepared. At 10:15 a.m., Margaret presented our enforcement motion. Your Honor, pursuant to Texas Family Code Section 262.202DG, as amended by HB 7105. The removal order issued on July 14, 2025, is stayed retroactively effective July 25, 2025. Further, the petition for removal before this court should be dismissed with prejudice as jurisdiction now requires full legislative authority, and our client has demonstrated irreparable harm and statutory entitlement. CPS counsel protested, urging the court to interpret HB 7105 narrowly and arguing that dismissing the removal petition exceeded judicial authority. Judge Alvarez, however, had prepared. She leaned forward, tapping her gavel. The legislature's retroactive provision leaves no room for partial stays. I hereby enforce the stay and dismiss the removal petition as moot. CPS is ordered to expunge all records of the removal order from the Johnsons' files and provide a formal apology within 7 days. I felt a cold relief wash through me. That apology, rare from a government agency, would become part of our public record, a tangible acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Outside the courtroom, photographers snapped images of our relief-stricken faces. It was a final judicial confirmation that the clock could not be turned back on our family's rights. Noon, launching the whistleblower portal. By midday, I was back at the IGO office, where Aisha Brooks and her team were ready to unveil the new digital whistleblower portal. A banner hung over a table laden with refreshments. Protect Our Kids Report, Misconduct, Secure Justice. Community leaders, CPS employees, and media gathered as Aisha delivered an opening remark. Today, we launch a secure anonymous portal for CPS employees, contractors, and anyone with information on child welfare misconduct. Reports will go directly to the IGO, bypassing managerial chains, ensuring impartial investigation. This tool transforms our law into action. She clicked a button on her laptop, and a large screen displayed the portal's interface. The Texas coat of arms, a field for uploading documents, a text box for narrative and encryption status. Your identity is protected by state statute. You can even upload audio or video evidence. Attendees queued to test the portal, creating dummy accounts in real time. Reporters filmed the rollout, and by 1:00 p.m., social media accounts lit up with posts: new CPS whistleblower portal, live report misconduct here. I shook hands with a dozen caseworkers who queued to ask questions. One young woman said, "I'm still healing from the guilt of bypassing medical checks in a past case. I'm going to file a report." I squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, and you're giving voice to children who couldn't speak for themselves." The portal's launch was more than a technology event. It signaled a cultural shift from secrecy to accountability. 3:00 p.m., training session, kickoff with caseworkers. That afternoon, I joined to CPS regional offices for the first mandatory training session on due process protocols. The auditorium was filled with caseworkers, supervisors, and legal counsel, each wearing name badges sporting colorful ribbons for Transparency Champion. On stage, a banner read HB 7105 Compliance Training, Due Process, and Conflict of Interest. Our training team, composed of legal experts, child psychologists, and veteran caseworkers, delivered modules on recognizing conflicts of interest, how to disclose personal relationships and recuse oneself from cases, due process procedures, consulting medical professionals, documenting all steps, and securing parental appeal rights, use of whistleblower portal, reporting misconduct and supporting reporting colleagues, cultural sensitivity, treating families with respect, acknowledging trauma, and ensuring unbiased investigations. I spoke briefly. You joined CPS to protect children. HB 7105 strengthens your tools by clarifying due process. No caseworker should fear reprisal for doing the right thing. This isn't just training, it's the law that backs you up. The session concluded with small group breakouts, where caseworkers practiced responding to hypotheticals, an anonymous report from a redacted family member, a pediatrician's conflicting note, and a potential insider complaint. The energy in the room was hopeful. I heard one supervisor whisper, "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I never knew recusal was mandatory." By 5:00 p.m., I left knowing that policies were only as good as the people who lived them. These sessions, repeated statewide, would lay the groundwork for lasting change. 7:00 p.m. Community Town Hall and Victory Forum. That evening, I co-hosted a town hall at the Downtown Community Center titled From Trauma to Triumph, HB 7105, Implementation Forum. The auditorium brimmed with parents, teachers, advocates, and journalists. A large screen displayed a timeline: July 14th, removal order issued; July 25th, stay dissolved; July 27th, HB 7105 signed; August 1st, training begins; August 15th, portal launch; September 1st, audits commence. I opened, we've moved from crisis to reform. But real accountability requires community engagement. Panelists included Emily Anderson sharing her journey from despair to empowerment. Officer Jenkins discussing his path from fear to whistleblower hero. Dr. Maria Santos outlining psychological benefits of due process for children. Rep. Nguyen and Senator Bell detailing legislative intent and future policy opportunities. The Q&A was animated. Parents asked how they could support audits. Teachers asked for classroom resources to support affected students. And a retired judge asked about potential expansion of due process protections in juvenile justice. The session ended with an invitation to sign up as parent advocates for local oversight committees. Over 200 attendees signed up, filling clipboards at the back table. As the forum concluded, Emily and I exchanged a look of profound relief. Our fight had galvanized a network of informed citizens ready to watch the system we once feared. Late night, reflecting on the journey. By 10 p.m. back home, I sat on the porch steps, the night air wrapping around me. The baby sock, our battle's emblem, hung in its frame across from me, and the music box echoed a faint lullaby somewhere inside. I ran through the past 4 months. Shock and despair, the initial removal order and our powerlessness. Legal battles, district, stay appellate, reversal writ to Supreme Court. Legislative crusade petition, special session, HB 7105's passage. Implementation, kickoff oversight committee, judicial enforcement portal, launch caseworker training, community engagement. Each step had been punctuated by sleepless nights, tears, and near breakdowns. Each victory had come with fresh tests. CPS appeals, bureaucratic delays, rulemaking gambits. Yet tonight, the momentum felt irreversible. I thought of other families I'd met, couples trembling under CPS visits, grandparents blocked by legal technicalities, children lost in the system's cold machinery. HB 7105 and our collective vigilance offered them a path forward. But I also recognized the hard truth: power, once constrained, often adapts. Tomorrow's threats might come from regulatory loopholes or technological workarounds. Our work would never truly end. Dawn of a new purpose. As I closed my journal and turned off the porch light, I caught a glimpse of the framed plaque beside the sock Protect Parents' Rights Act, August 1st, 2025. Restoring due process. Underneath, someone had placed a single purple ribbon, a tribute from the whistleblower support group. I felt a quiet swell of pride and responsibility. I climbed into bed beside Emily, who was already asleep with Sophia tucked under her arm. I slipped on a pair of socks, my nightly ritual replacing the dreaded baby sock with a warm, protective barrier, and whispered a vow. No abuse of power, no secret memo, no insider vendetta will ever take your family again. We will watch, we will speak, and we will defend due process for every parent in Texas. As I drifted off, the lullaby of the music box played softly in my mind, a reminder that through fear and triumph, love endures. And in that gentle darkness, I realized the true measure of our journey. We had transformed our pain into policy, our terror into testimony, and our struggle into a legacy. We had built not just a shield for our daughter, but a fortress for every family's right to justice. This fight had changed us, and through us, it would change the world.